The big story, obviously, Paul George will join the Sixers, 4-year, $212 million. Andre Drummond, he gets a 2-year deal. Oubre's back. Eric Gordon is coming to Philadelphia. And what can they do next? We'll get all that and more right now in studio with 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers insider Austin Krell, who's in here for the next hour, so you guys can fire off Sixers thoughts and questions to 609-403-0973. We got a ton of questions in the first hour for you, so we're going to throw a bunch of them out throughout the hour. But let's just kind of break it all down, man. The George deal. You were awake, weren't you?
It was a long night, and had me contemplating the meaning of life often throughout last night. Because you hear like 6 different things from like all these different people, and you're wondering like, okay, is this going to happen soon? Happen late? And eventually it got to like 2 a.m. and I'm sitting there on my phone and I'm tired. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to set my timer for 20 minutes, and every 20 minutes going to go off. I'm going to check my phone and hope that the deal comes to fruition. And eventually ended up on TikTok for a while, which as one does when you're my age.
Is that the place?
Yeah, well, that's the place that you stay up, And then as I'm on TikTok, I get a breaking from Woj. I'm like, this has to be it. And
so Woj is breaking stuff on TikTok now.
No, on Twitter. But I had my phone ready to, like the notification dinged on my phone. But I had pre-written the story either way, so I was ready to go. The signing happens exactly 3:30 in the morning. The story is up on our website at 3:36.
Yeah, I saw it this morning. I said, my gosh, my man was up.
Yeah, no, I was not missing that.
So you didn't miss it, and the Sixers get it done. And really, this is, I thought Jake Fisher really laid out how this was like a 1-year kind of master plan. Like this was like a 300-day type of vision for Morey, that he really had to calculate this and make it all work. He sends Harden, gets the draft picks, gets all 1-year deals, clears that out, gets the cap space. Earlier in the day, he gets Drummond and Gordon. I would have to imagine with the knowledge that this deal was going to get done.
Yeah, so with the Eric Gordon thing, it's a minimum deal. So that's not going to really functionally bother your cap space. The Drummond thing is they're saying $5+ million or $10+ million over 2 years. So that's you could say either way, cap space or the mid-level exception. But none of those things are like guaranteed in the moment. They're going to bother your cap space. So you kind of have an inkling like obviously the Eric Gordon thing is a sign that they know someone big is coming, because why is Eric Gordon opting out of his deal and moving from Phoenix to Philadelphia if he doesn't have a good feeling as to what's to come? And he also played with Paul George for a year with the Clippers. So they line up these deals, and yeah, I think I don't know that it was Paul George specifically for 300 days to a year, but there was a max. They felt like they were going to be in position for a while to be where they could offer that kind of money. And we could say, oh, LA is LA and New York is New York, and no one wants to come to Philly, and it's the West Coast, and all that jazz. Money also talks at the end of the day, and we see that in sports all the time. And the Clippers were not going to go above 3,150. That was something that I had heard for weeks on end, and that they were going to hold strong. And whether Paul wanted to leave there or not, he cared about the money and the years more. And that's the story here.
So, yeah, and because listen, I mean, one of the problems with Tobias Harris was he was a nice player, but the contract was always weighing him down.
Yeah.
If he was just a normally signed player and he's the fourth guy, I don't know that he'd get into the same criticism. So do we look at Paul George similarly, where that contract is going to be the downfall of him, or can he match? I don't know if he's going to match $50 million at the end of that deal, but ultimately on the court, is he a superior player to what Harris was? Because Harris's numbers at the end of the day, you're like, oh, this guy was a pretty good player if you simply look at the numbers. We all know in the playoffs he came up small, but that contract was always the problem for him. How will that play out for George?
So like in a vacuum, yeah, Tobias, solid player. Like you look at Basketball Reference, his numbers are pretty solid.
Just got $25 million, by the way.
Yeah, to go to Detroit.
2 years, $52 million. So somebody else looked at Tobias Harris and said, "I'm going to give you $52 million."
Which I wonder if 2 years, that's not a lot of security. I wonder if that was the market or that was him saying, like, this is the biggest payday. I'll go for 2 years because I don't trust that this team necessarily is going to be in a position to win anything while I'm there. But I'll go be a a nice producer and a babysitter for the young guys. But to answer your question about Paul George, there's a couple things about like just fundamental Paul George things that are different from Tobias. Just his desire and willingness to shoot shoot threes, regardless of context. I posted a video on my Twitter account a little while ago of him just shooting threes. It's like there's 17 shots in there. He makes 7 of 17, which is 41%. Right on his season average, but low passes, high passes, off V cuts, off dribble, off screen, off of curls, variety of contexts. He's going to shoot the three. He's comfortable with it. I think that's already a better fit than Tobias. He has, I think, at this stage of his career, taken a step back in terms of his creativity off the dribble, but he's still, when you compare that to what you had, where Tobias really couldn't dribble.
No creativity.
Correct.
Couldn't dribble.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Couldn't finish.
Yeah.
He's one of the worst finishers I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. He'll have this trend throughout every season where he has a couple weeks to a month where he's finishing really well, and you're like, oh, maybe he's learned something or like turned a corner, and you're like, nope. But by the end of the season, it's back to the same guy. But as much as that concern for Paul George at 34 exists because like he has lost a step, he's still able to get to the basket and use his athleticism in a way that I think Tobias took a step back. I think one of the things that happened with Tobias this year is he lost a step physically. He didn't really know how to make up for that or replace that. But like he couldn't get to the rim the same way. His mid-range game was not as productive. I wonder if there were injuries that nagged him throughout the season and they were never reported on it because he didn't want that out there. But you could see like there was it was just a different level of player, and I wonder how much of that is just he took a step back and was never the greatest athlete anyway, or it was just a pure confidence thing.
Well, I think that contract really was hanging over him, and I don't know that he handled it all that well, and it was pretty well known that the people were kind of done with him maybe 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it was never a strong relationship. The playoff flameouts, high profile at that, were always there. And listen, I mean, Paul George, 114 playoff games. He is I remember when the Clippers lost to the Nuggets in the bubble, and it's the iconic Paul George misses the three off the side of the backboard as the Nuggets are clamping down to embarrass the Clippers and win the series by being down 3-1. I had an agent text me, and they're like, way off P strikes, and people call him playoff P, and ever since then I've been like, oh, it's way off P because that's what it reminded me of. And like, and it's all to say, he's had bad moments for sure. He's played in 114 playoff games. You're gonna have bad moments, like that's just the nature of the sport. He's also led the Clippers to a conference finals in 2021.
He led the Clippers, the Pacers there twice with not very good teams.
Do you remember those? Remember those wars between the Heat?
They were awesome.
Yeah, the Heat and the Pacers, and it was.
And
Paul
you
George.
look, somebody texted in today and asked, who was his second guy, and I said, I don't know, Roy Hibbert, George Hill.
I think it was Lance Stevenson, maybe.
There's you want to throw him in there? I mean,
yeah.
I think Bynum was on one of those teams.
Maybe, but really, like that was Roy Hibbert before he
got the yips or something.
Yeah, like his model of big man was phased out of the NBA completely within a year or two.
He, George was the best player on those Pacers. So as the best player, he got you to 2 finals. So he's at least at that level. Now, he's not that player anymore. How far away is he from the Pacer guy who the Clippers got? Where is he now from those performers?
Well, I think he's someone now who just doesn't have the ability to.
And was he a different player after that injury?
No, I mean, like I don't really remember Paul George that well before the injury. Like he was an up and coming star by the time of that injury, like an established all-star, but still up and coming. And if you recall, he gets traded to Oklahoma City, and that was because he found out that Pacers weren't interested in acquiring another star to help him, and he was like, "We weren't trying to win. Get me out of here." And so traded to Oklahoma City, has the best season of his career in Oklahoma City.
I think people forget when he got
28 a
sent to
game.
Oklahoma City, right? That he really,
Yeah.
people didn't think much of them when he got there, and he kind of like re-elevated.
That was after KD left, and I
Yep.
was like, oh, this is the new thing in Oklahoma City. And the second year he was there, which is the year before he got traded away to the Clippers, he averaged like 28 a game. He was
28-8.
Yeah, MVP finalist, All-Star, DPOI finalist. He was legitimately a top 5 player in the league that year. He's not that guy anymore. He's taken some more injuries, obviously. He's aged. It's inevitable. I don't think you need him to be the player that he was in those prime years, though. You just need him to be like, look, when the ball swings your way, attack a closeout, do something off the dribble, catch and shoot threes. You can average an easy 22, 23 a game here.
If he's the Clippers version,
yeah,
that's a significant upgrade over having Tobias Harris.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
As a fit, too.
For sure. Just the fit by itself will be better, make or miss. Even if even if it's a night where he has 16 points, it's the way in which he gets those 16 points that matters a lot, to me at least. And he's not gonna have to expend as much energy on offense in theory. And he will have the help on defense with Joel roaming around the rim. So it's not like you have to distress yourself to keep every ball handler in front of you. You have insurance behind you in Joel, ready to roam at the rim. So I think there is some padding for him on both ends of the floor that maybe doesn't exist out in LA. And we can talk about Joel's injury history and why, why that's a detriment, why that's a risk, whatnot. We also then have to talk about Kawhi Leonard's injury history and how Paul George was often left in the playoff series in LA high and dry and to fend for himself while Kawhi Leonard had to ice his knees or have season-ending surgery. And when you consider that, and then you consider the fact that the Clippers in the middle of last season gave Kawhi a 3-year, $150 million extension without telling Paul George, according to Brian Windhorst yesterday. That's a relationship thing. It's going to rub any player in the NBA the wrong way, especially one who thinks, how many years in a row have I sat here and had to fend for myself in the playoffs while Kawhi was not available? And I don't think it's Kawhi versus PG and animosity there, but I think it's like that's the level of respect you have for me that you couldn't fill me in or say hey, this is what we're doing with Kawhi, and just let me know. There is relationship management that was failed when you give Kawhi that deal, set your market for your other star, and don't tell him about it.
Yeah. So Austin Krell's with us in studio. You can read out about the signing over at 97.3ESPN.com. So Paul George is the first move. That ends up happening early in the morning. Before that, they get Andre Drummond. I think we should dive into him a little bit because it's been a position of need since 2013. I mean, or the first time that Embiid stepped on the floor.
It's been a position of need since Ben Simmons left the team.
Since Ben Simmons left with Andre Drummond.
Yes.
Because they had Drummond here, and they traded him away, and then they never replaced him. And we've seen a plethora of stiffs walk through that door that just could not get the job done. And, I contend a lot that Hartenstein just killed them. And they had no answer. Even Embiid had a rough time with him. But obviously, Embiid does enough on the one end of the floor to keep it. But when he went off the floor, Hartenstein just absolutely wrecked them. And they had no answer. And that shouldn't be the case anymore. That when you lose Embiid for 17 minutes here, 15, 17, 18, 20 minutes, you now have a more than serviceable guy.
So I think it's fascinating, the juxtaposition of Drummond signing with the Sixers yesterday and the Knicks losing Hartenstein today. 3 years, $87 million to Oklahoma City, for those who don't know. I think the Knicks, in that series, and in the playoffs as it went on, became increasingly obvious that their best creator was Jalen Brunson, and there was a big, big, big drop-off between him and everybody else. They were able to mask that really well because they had guys like Mitchell Robinson for a while, but largely Hartenstein and even Josh Hart, who were just demons on the glass. Mm-hmm. And so, the first possession, the first play of the possession might not result in a make, but they're getting tip outs and they're getting rebounds and they're getting second chances, third, fourth, fifth chances against the Sixers. Drummond is that guy. He is, we talk about like stiffs and whatnot, and this guy and that guy that backed up Embiid.
By the way, DeAndre Jordan got another contract. That's unbelievable.
Incredible. It's an incredible heist. Andre Drummond that isn't all to say that Andre Drummond is some great big at this stage of his career. He's never been a good finisher. His terrible hands, doesn't block a ton of shots. He's a drop back big. You can't switch him on the perimeter, so he's questionable at best in the playoffs. But he's the best rebounding big man in the NBA. Like advanced numbers portray him as the best big man in the NBA when it comes to specifically rebounding the basketball on either end of the floor. And so you look at those issues in the playoffs, and you have to be careful to not let recency bias kick in when you're making these deals. But rebounding has long been something that the Sixers have struggled with since Ben Simmons was booed off the floor against Atlanta.
Yeah. By the way, Drummond, when he started for the Bulls last year, averaged almost 20 rebounds a night.
Yeah,
it starts
20. It was like his per 36 minutes numbers was like 17 points, 20 rebounds.
Yeah,
like
I mean, when he actually got the starting minutes, I mean, he averaged 18 rebounds a game as a starter. Now, in a backup role, though, you just need to ask him. He played 17 minutes a game in Chicago. In Philadelphia, when he was here, he was playing about 18 minutes a game. And in those 18 minutes a game, I mean, he's literally, one of your best rebounders. I mean, so it's a huge addition that just gets overlooked because it's 2 years, $10 million, and it's like, oh, okay, you're the backup center. But I think everybody out there listening understands how big of a void that has been.
And I also think that, like, we can talk about what do you do in the playoffs, because if you're gonna, ideally, you would like to switch everything in the playoffs and make it so that way teams just can't attack you out of screens and whatnot. Drummond can't guard in space that well, so you're a drop back big. How do you pad around him to cover that up? Do you say we're just going to double down on offense and we're going to play with Paul George and Tyrese Maxey in those lineups together so that way we can at least cover up on offense? Do we try to do more with perimeter defense so that way Drummond doesn't have to really worry as much about trying to walk the line between stopping ball and doubling back to the rim? There's a variety of ways that they're going to have to cover that up, but I do think that them getting Andre Drummond, not only just in the regular season in terms of eating up those minutes when Embiid doesn't play or when is going to be huge. It's going to give you extra possessions. It's going to help you end defensive possessions with one shot, but it's also going to put the writing on the wall for Paul Reed here. And I know he's a fan favorite and whatnot. $7.723 million. The fact that I know that off the top of my head is sad. But $7.723 million, non-guaranteed Paul Reed next year. So they have a choice here. Do we waive him and create a total of, I think it's like 10 million in cap space to use on a free agent that we like right now? Or do we trade him? Because under this godforsaken CBA that is ridiculously complicated, it's the worst thing anyone's ever written. I don't know why they did that to us, us, the media, why they did that to us. But there's a provision there that if you're a team that is not at the apron, which the Sixers are not, you can trade out a player making between $7 million and $29 million and take back—
That's a big range.
Weird. Right. Very weird. Take back $7.5 million more than you sent out. Paul Reed just so happens to make $7.7 million. Very convenient. You can trade him and take back $15 million roughly in a deal if you were to trade him. So your options are really, do we create $10 million in cap space, or do we turn Paul Reed into a trade chip and make that effectively our cap space by trading him with some stuff to get a player back we like in a deal? But I think the writing is on the wall when you go and you draft a Dembana who may be a two-way guy, maybe a very inexpensive contract to develop, and then you go and you sign Drummond for less than you have Paul Reed for. I think the writing has to be on the wall as they continue to fill out this roster.
Well, and how, in the end, that breaks for them because they got knocked out in the first round. If they advance, they can't do that. So them losing actually ends up kind of helping them.
Danny Ainge did him a favor. Imagine that.
Right? I mean, when you think about it like in those terms, the loss to the Knicks in the first round, big picture helps them out because of this Reed situation that they can now try to add to this particular team. We'll see if there's any interest in Paul Reed. I know you mentioned Danny Ainge, because they offered the deal last year. The Sixers end up matching the deal, bringing him back with this provision that if they lost in the first round, he is not guaranteed. So we'll see what happens with Paul Reed. Real quick, let's get to Gordon and how you kind of see his role and who he kind of replaces.
It's funny. I was looking at him on Basketball Reference last night, and I'm like, okay, like just getting a feel for the numbers. Dude averages 11 points a game and literally nothing else. Like, basically no other counting stat other than shooting and scoring. So I was like, this man is a 35-year-old bucket. He's 6'3". He's a shooting guard. They list him as a wing at some websites. I would contest that he's not big enough to be a wing at this stage of his career. But at 6'3", like a low center of gravity, which is what you want for a guy on defense at that size, he's going to shoot the leather off the basketball. He's a volume three-point shooter. That's what he's always been. There's still a little bit of like off-the-dribble equity that he has that I think will help. But really, he's out there to space the floor with whoever he's out there with. I think if you put him in a backcourt with Tyrese Maxey, you're leaving yourself open to defensive problems because one is 6'2", 6'3", other is 6'3". Two small guards in the backcourt. We know how that works.
Similar to the guy that drafted, too.
Correct. But even if you have defensive issues, it's just going to stretch the opposing defense out, and make life easier for your stars as they try to operate. Obviously, there are a Morey connection from his days in Houston. There's a Paul George connection from his days in Los Angeles. But, I mean, I think it means something when you are leaving a very warm state out there in Arizona when we have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. Say what you want about the team, but that's a lot of firepower. And you are declining your player option to get a little bit more to move across country to Philadelphia. It means you believe in something. And I think I was having a conversation yesterday with somebody. When you add Paul George, you have Tyrese Maxey already, you have Joel Embiid already, you're going to see veterans flock to Philly as much as the Sixers can offer roster spots, that is, because you're looking at the landscape of the league. Oklahoma City isn't going anywhere. LA isn't going. The Lakers are not going anywhere. Debate, you can debate how good they really are, but they're there. Dallas is not going anywhere. Denver, you're stacking teams up in the West really quickly, and if you're a veteran looking for a chance to win, your shot might be in the East, and it might be with a team like Philly.
Well, the East has got interesting. We'll continue to take a look at it. Austin Krell, you can follow him on Twitter at NBA Krell, 973ESPN.com. So a lot of questions coming in about what's next. We'll take a look at that. We'll read off some of your text messages. 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. You can text your Sixers questions in. This hour is brought to you by Broadlee's Plumbing, Heating, AC. Broadlee's your trusted source for heating, plumbing service, and installations for generations. Call them at 609-390-3907 or visit online at broadlees.net. When we come back, we'll take a look at what could be next. They do have some cap space. They do have some possibilities. I see a lot of your questions coming in, so keep them coming. 609-403-0973. 973ESPN.com. Sixers Insider Austin Krell till the end of the hour. And more Sixers free agent. Maybe something happens while we're here. Who knows?
I forgot the website and get my writing done.
Let's get crazy there. Back with more Sports Bash coming up on 97.3 ESPN.